Afternoon, everyone. This is Olga Redding, and I am the Education Outreach Coordinator for Iowa Organic Association. Welcome to Food as Medicine, a Systems Perspective webinar. We are happy to have you here today. So because we have a lot of folks in attendance today on this webinar, I will please ask you to mute yourself and also mute your video simply because we have so many people in attendance. What we'll do is we'll feel free to type in your questions in the chat room as they come up. I will, put together all those questions and send them to Dr. Nish at the end so he can answer them. We may not be able to get to all of them as we'll try to stay to 1 o'clock time frame. Be mindful of everyone's time, but thank you everyone for attending this wonderful webinar. We're so excited to have everyone here today. My name is Olga Redding. I do education outreach for Iowa Organic Association. And today we have Dr. Nish as our guest speaker. And he will be talking about a very important topic, very important topic. So let's go ahead and I'll go ahead and introduce Dr. Nish. He has practiced interventional radiology for 27 years at UnityPoint Health here in the Des Moines Metro. He also completed a 2-year fellowship at the Andrew Wells Center for Integrative Medicine at University of Arizona. And his whole goal and premise is to educate his patients and the community as a whole about the importance of, importance of great nutrition. And so today you'll hear more from him, a very exciting topic, very excited to have him. So what we'll do too is I'll go ahead and do a quick PowerPoint slides about Iowa Organic Association and our mission. And then after that, Dr. Nish will be able to present his presentation. And then like I said, put your questions in the chat. And then at the end of the meeting, we'll have 5-10 minutes or so to answer some questions. I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen now. Dr. Nish, do you want to say anything?
No, but it's a pleasure for me to be here, and take it away, Olga.
Okay, perfect. Excellent. So let me go ahead and get my presentation popped up. All righty. So yeah, you guys, if you could please mute yourself and mute your videos, that would be great. We have a lot of folks in attendance today. So, Iowa Organic Association, we are a nonprofit organization committed to organic education, advocacy, and cooperation. We were established back in 2006, and our mission is to advance agriculture and food systems in Iowa. Our members represent a diverse community of Iowa's farmers, gardeners, food and farm businesses, and advocates and consumers who are champions of the organic movement. And all of you guys are part of this community, so we're thankful to each and every one of you. As far as our priorities, they're divided in 4 different categories. Education, which I'm in charge of. We provide programs, expertise, and information to help expand and diversify organic opportunities in Iowa. Some of the things that we have accomplished are these growing organic expertise workshops with technical service providers across the state. And we are also doing a growing organic expertise across colleges in Iowa, which has been a great process as well. We also have Midwest Organic Pork Conference, and we do on-farm field days, webinars that you're part of today, and offer a variety of online resources. As far as outreach, we connect with target audiences and the public to promote research, events, and resources that are beneficial to the organic community. Of course, we're part of a variety of conferences, trade shows, community events, and of course, you're welcome to find a lot of that information on our website. As far as advocacy, we do connect with various policy leaders, and we are dedicated to support Iowa's growing organic industry. We met with Secretary Nagel last year, and we're planning to follow up another visit with him again. And then as far as community, we encourage a culture of collaboration by connecting organic experts, stakeholders, and resources to strengthen Iowa's organic community. And I have people in the waiting room, so I'm going to go ahead and allow everybody in. As far as a wonderful resource that is available on our website, it is this organic resource directory. This is the newest version that we have. So feel free to connect with me if you want this new version. I am able to email it to you via PDF format, but it has about 900 businesses, nonprofits, educators, and service providers that basically can help anyone looking to pursue organic agriculture and anyone that is interested in organic. So a huge resource available to you guys. In addition, the resource directory, I can mail a hard copy if you're interested. That's another option. And then, of course, as a nonprofit organization, we rely heavily on your support. So if you are interested to become a member or potentially have a business and would like to be a sponsor, please connect with myself or Roz, our executive director. Our emails are listed here. But that's all I have to share with you right now. So thank you for being here. And I'll go ahead and let Dr. Nish take over.
Okay, thanks, Olga. Let me get my screen up here. Okay. Well, it's really a pleasure to be here today. I had a great time kind of putting my thoughts together on this, how I wanted to present the information of the connection between food and health. And so it's been fun for me. Along the way, the last few years, I've learned a lot about, metabolic disease and how our lifestyle profoundly affects our health. But I've also learned a lot about what all of you do, and that's how do we tend the soil? How do we tend our plants? And I am no expert. And so, you have vastly more experience in this than I do. But what I've done is I've kind of looked at the parallels of what's happened with agriculture and what's happened with health and healthcare. And it was very startling to me to look at oh, the same thing has happened in both spheres. So food is medicine, the challenge. And what I want to do is I just want to start out with a story. So I want all of you, and I usually start my talks this way, I want you to get comfortable in your chair if you're standing, and I want you to close your eyes, and I want you just to slowly breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. And what I'm going to do is I am going to tell a story, and I want you to listen closely to this story. And I want to use this story as an example of what's gone on in both health and our food system as we go through the talk. So imagine yourself and your family. You're working a minimum wage, you have 2 children, you're overweight, you were diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure, and now you've received a diagnosis of breast cancer. I want to introduce you to Dana. Dana is a 35-year-old single mother working a minimum wage job with 2 young children. 4 years ago, Dana was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes at the age of 31. She was also diagnosed with high blood pressure, and she's 50 pounds overweight. Dana's 2 children are both overweight. One has ADHD, the other has developmental learning problems. Dana recently received a diagnosis of breast cancer. Dana loves her children and is doing the best she can. Dana lives in a small apartment in a medium-sized city and relies on public transportation to get to work. The closest food source she has consistent access to is a mini mart. Rarely is she able to acquire fresh, unprocessed foods. She used to fish in the local river to supplement her diet, but the fish have died off due to contamination from farm and factory runoff. Dana's stressed. She's scared. She's worried she will die from her breast cancer. She worries who will take care of her children. She worries about getting COVID because she knows she's at high risk. This is an all too typical story. And, you know, we're going to delve into this, and how does our food system affect health, and how does how we grow our food affect health? I think, you know, you read this Food as Medicine, the challenge, and there's lots of challenges. But I think the biggest challenge is getting people to understand that food truly is medicine and makes a difference. And I think one of the biggest reasons for this is, for the last several decades, we've all been drilled into our heads, a calorie is a calorie. Too many calories in, not enough calories out, irregardless of the food. And that's the problem. And we couldn't be more wrong. Food makes all the difference. So if you go back to cell biology, and some of you may be biologists, cell biologists has always known that if a cell or being is ailing, we need to look to the environment. We need to look to the environment. Hang on. For some reason, this is not going forward. You know, it's really interesting that we've become enamored with the genome, right? We can take genetic code, we can slice it and dice it, and we can CRISPR it and all of these other things. So we think everything revolves around the genetic code, but guess what influences whether a gene is expressed or not? The environment. So it's not about genetics, it's about the environment. Let's talk a little bit about quantum physics. And, you know, I'm going to bring all kinds of different disciplines into this talk, because we are no longer in a linear Newtonian universe. We live in a holistic universe. So we have to listen to one another. The quantum physicists tell us that the universe is a multi-dimensional unified whole. All of us and everything are intricately connected. We do not live in silos. We do not live in the heart silo or the brain silo or the agriculture silo. We are all interconnected. This reductionist view that the whole is equal to the sum of the parts is no longer valid. We can't continue with that model. Albert Einstein said, "We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them." He also had another quote: "The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result." And that's where we're stuck. We keep doing the same thing over and over, and we wonder why nothing changes. Yeah. So the challenge, food is medicine, the challenge. The standard American diet, which, you know, the acronym is SAD, which it truly is a leading cause of premature death and disability in the United States. This is not an opinion. This is a fact. This is a fact. So what does this mean for our food system and health? How we produce and consume food is how we care for the earth, every living being on the earth, and how we care for each other. So when we produce and consume food in this mechanistic commercialized form that we do now, we are literally destroying the earth. Think deforestation, soil degradation, soil loss, mineral and nutrient loss. And we can no longer view the earth as this inexhaustible resource for the taking. We must view the earth and all its creatures as a symbiotic whole. You are not on the earth, you are of the earth. So we are all part of this, from the smallest microorganisms in our soil to the largest animals that roam the earth. We're all interconnected. We're all interconnected. A component of health and wellness is dependent on delivery of highly nutritious foods to the body with assimilation of those nutrients through proper digestion and absorption. If you believe this premise, then the rest of the talk really becomes second nature. We must also understand what influences assimilation of those nutrients in our cells. So we've developed a system where we think that we can supplement those nutrients we're missing in food through pills. Guess what? It doesn't work. The supplement industry is like a $260 billion industry, and there is little empirical scientific evidence that any of them make much difference at all. Because what we're using supplements for is a supplement for highly nutritious whole food. As I tell my patients, you can't supplement your way out of a bad diet. It's impossible. Earth health, plant health, human health. They're all the same. Each is inextricably tied to the other. Degradation of one leads to degradation of all. And industrialization of each system has had disastrous consequences. And we can talk for hours about the low-fat disaster. We can talk for hours about the chemical farming disaster, because they are truly disasters. As I tell people in other talks, I do a lot of talks on metabolic health. The biggest problem with health in the last 100 years is the low-fat diet. Because when we remove the fat from food, guess what we replaced it with? Sugar and highly processed carbohydrates. And we can go on for hours on that one. What's the current paradigm? The current paradigm is modern agriculture is the solution to hunger and malnutrition. Think the Green Revolution. Modern medicine is the solution to disease. And technology will rescue us from all our problems, right? Just let's throw more technology at it and we'll simply tech our way out of the problem. Reality, modern agriculture is the problem. Modern medicine is the problem. And folks, technology is not going to rescue us. Sure, we can use tech to do certain things. We can use tech to develop better energy sources, but we cannot tech our way out of a bad food system and a poor healthcare system. That's the reality. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a comparison here between modern agriculture and modern medicine. And then I'm going to build my case over the next few slides for why that comparison is so apropos to what you do. So what happens with modern agriculture? Well, we're using increasing chemical inputs to maintain yields. We don't have soil anymore, we have dirt. Our weeds are becoming more resistant to the herbicides that we spray all over our crops. Our food supply is dependent on just a few crops growing on the same land year after year. Monocropping. Soil degradation from lack of crop rotation, incessant tilling, and lack of cover crops results in not replenishing nitrogen and carbon to our soil. Our organic matter is declining. Our soil is blowing away. I have a cabin in northern Minnesota. I drive up I-35. After October, those fields are bare. The wind's blowing across them and you can just see the dirt blowing away. We've destroyed the soil microbiome. So all of those bacteria and fungi, the mycorrhizal network are being destroyed. So important for nourishing the plants that we grow. It's those fungi that extract the minerals from the soil and exchange those minerals to the plant for carbohydrates from the plant. And then we have our environmental dead zones from chemical runoff. We're all familiar with the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico because of all the runoff going, nitrogenous and chemical runoff going down the Mississippi and basically deoxygenating the water and killing all living creatures. So let's look at modern medicine. We have increasingly large chemical inputs in the name of pharmaceuticals to maintain, and I put, quote, health. We have bacteria that are resistant to the antibiotics. Think weeds that are resistant to the herbicides. Our, quote, health is dependent on using the same drugs that don't work year after year. The pharmaceutical industry gets this. So in the last few decades, we have not developed a new class of antibiotics, yet we're developing all kinds of drugs for chronic disease. Why is that? Well, if you have a chronic disease, you're going to have to take that drug every day for the rest of your life. If you have an infection, most of the time you need an antibiotic for 10 days. That's why we don't develop new antibiotics. There's no long-term cash flow. Human health and soil health. Our soil, our gut microbiome, those trillions upon trillions of bacteria, fungi, viruses in our gut are degraded from the wrong inputs, antibiotics, highly processed food, and the chemicals within our food system. And then we have what I'm going to call human dead zones, otherwise known as food deserts. And these are based on one zip code. We'll talk more about that. Modern medicine, we're number one. Some of you might be scratching your head. We're number one at what? Are we number one at life expectancy? Are we number one at cancer cure? Are we number one at heart disease cure? It's not what you think. Let's look at the data. So this is a chart. This is from the organization, the Organization of Economically Cooperative and Developed Countries. There's 37 of them, 37 of those countries. And this is data compiled from 1970 to 2015. So on the vertical axis, you have life expectancy in years. On the horizontal axis, you have dollars spent per person per year. What are we number one in? We are by far number one in healthcare spending. We're number one, approximately $9,000 per year per person in this country, resulting in several $1 trillion expenditure in healthcare. Yet guess what? Out of the 37 countries, we're 29th in life expectancy. 29th in life expectancy. We are not getting any bang for our buck. Healthcare continues to increase in cost, yet our life expectancy is diminishing. With the COVID pandemic last year, we lost 1 year of life expectancy, and in the 3 years prior, we lost ground as well. Those are startling statistics. We are number one per capita in diabetes. We are number 2 in cancer. We're number 5 in dementia and number 6 in cardiovascular disease. I want you to think about this, because this is our modern healthcare system. Are we getting healthier? Not a chance. So modern medicine, in my opinion, is the problem. It is the problem. Let's look at this. The axiom is that modern medicine works to keep people healthy, but does it? And let's define the word axiom. Axiom is a statement or preposition that is regarded as being established, accepted, or self-evidentially true. So we all say, oh yeah, modern medicine, it's great. It's solving all of our problems. We do things very well in modern medicine. 2 things that I can think of. 1, we're really good at trauma. If you're in an accident, we have great trauma services. Second thing we've done pretty well with, now that before the pandemic, infectious diseases. We've been pretty good at infectious diseases, but that's not going to happen anymore. Because why? Well, we're going to see more zoonotic jumping of viruses to the human population. We're going to see more pandemics that we hopefully have some clue as to what we can do. And our antibiotics are becoming resistant to a lot of bugs. So we're okay there. We're pretty good in cancer care. You know, we've made some strides in cancer. We're really good at acute heart attacks. We throw stents in, we give drugs. People do pretty well, better than they used to 20, 30 years ago. But what we're not good at is chronic diseases. 70% of healthcare dollars are spent on the treatment of what we call non-communicable diseases, NCDs. And yet not one of those diseases is cured with modern medicine. We treat disease and its symptoms, but we don't cure disease. And I'm going to go through some case examples for you. 60% of Americans are affected by one of these chronic diseases. 42% are affected by two or more chronic conditions. Here's the other startling thing. Non-communicable diseases are developing sooner in the population, leading to earlier disability and fewer years of life. And this is really startling. I mean, we now have young children in grade school with type 2 diabetes. Children are getting adult diseases. So what are NCDs, non-communicable diseases? These are the big ones: diabetes, high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, cancer, autoimmune diseases, psychiatric diseases. Some of you might look at that and go, psychiatric diseases? Wait a minute, that's a brain disease. No, it's a metabolic disease. And then metabolic syndrome. So metabolic syndrome is this conglomeration of different signs and symptoms that we are based on abnormal metabolic pathways. All of these are treated with pharmaceuticals, right? Yet none of them is cured, not one. And then we have this huge problem in our older adult population, and we call it polypharmacy, taking more than 5 prescription medications per day. And guess what? Just the fact that you're taking 5 or more prescription medications, you have increased mortality risk. And 85% of those people taking those meds are not taking them appropriately. As with agriculture, we have increasing large chemical inputs to maintain, quote, health, but it's not working. Are we getting healthier? Not a chance. Not a chance. The current pandemic of obesity, diabetes, all these diseases, it's metabolically driven. And it's a direct result of our current ultra-processed food system. So what do we eat? We eat 4 major grains: corn, wheat, rice, and soy, not a grain of bean. Why? Because that's what the government subsidizes. That's what the government subsidizes. And guess what? To all those ultra-processed food, we're adding sugar. Sugar is an absolute metabolic disaster. So there was a study a number of years ago, and it looked at the consumption of a sugar-sweetened soda, 12-ounce can of soda, okay? Not the 20-ounce, not these 84-ounce big gulp, 12 ounces. If you drank 1 can of soda every day, your risk of diabetes, of developing diabetes, was 29% higher, irregardless of your weight or BMI. Sugar, it is toxic. So is corn, wheat, rice, and soy, are they inherently bad? No. If you ate those as unprocessed whole grains, you'd be okay. It's not the food itself, it's what's done to the food. So the industrial food industry takes those inputs, they deconstruct them, right? So let's use wheat as an example. They take the wheat, they strip the bran, which is our fiber, they strip the germ, and what's left is the endosperm, the carbohydrate. The germ has all the nutrients. So now we're left with this processed carbohydrate, which is incredibly rapidly metabolized. It spikes our blood sugar, it spikes our insulin, and then we go down this whole metabolic dysregulation pathway. So really, this agricultural monocropping directly leads to food monocropping, because our food is based on those 4 inputs: poor human health through the ultra processing, as well as lack of diversity. So we have this diverse microbiome, but our microbiome is becoming less diverse because our plant input into the microbiome is becoming less diverse. Less plant diversity, less microbiome diversity. It all interconnects. We're degrading the human soil, and our human soil is our gut microbiome, because of the overuse of human and animal antibiotics, because of the ultra-processed monotonous food system, because of chemicals in food production. We know that glyphosate disrupts our gut microbiome. Sounds similar to what's happened to our agricultural soil? incessant tilling, incessant chemical inputs, no crop rotation, no cover cropping, degraded soil. Food apartheid, this is a new word, and it can be a bit inflammatory. So if you notice first, I talked about dead zones as being food deserts, and I want to introduce you to the word food apartheid, because I honestly think that it is perfectly descriptive of what goes on in our society. And what it is, it's a structural oppression based on race and class that limits access to power and resources related to food and land, and results in poor health and poor people. We've systemically excluded whole groups of people based on color and socioeconomic status from good food. That's a systemic problem. It's really interesting. Everybody thinks our genetics is the biggest predictor of health and longevity, and that's not even close. A person's zip code is more predictive of a person's health and lifespan than their genetic code. There was a study done out of Chicago a couple of years ago, and they looked at the zip code along the lakefront on Michigan Avenue in the really high class area. They literally went 3 miles west. And if you know Chicago, west of Cottage Grove Avenue. And do you know what the difference in life expectancy was over that 3 miles? 9 years. Those people who lived west of Cottage Grove had a life expectancy 9 years less than those who lived on Michigan Avenue. Startling. So let's look at a couple case examples. Type 2 diabetes. This is the poster child for ineptitude in our healthcare system. 1970, 2% of the population had type 2 diabetes. And this is the kind of diabetes where you don't have an insulin deficiency, you just have insulin resistance. Your cells no longer respond to the insulin your pancreas is cranking out. So in 1970, we had 4.1 million people with diabetes. Now you have to remember in 1970, our population was 250 million, not 330. It was 2% of the population, 4 million people. Fast forward to 2018, 10.5% of the population has type 2 diabetes, 34.2 million people. 30 million more people have diabetes in less than 50 years. This is astounding. 1986, the total cost of and I don't have any data before 1986, but in 1986, the total cost of taking care of people with diabetes was $19.8 billion. Today, it's $327 billion and rising. Type 2 diabetes is a preventable disease through lifestyle intervention, not pharmaceutical intervention. Pharmaceuticals have never cured a case of diabetes. We manage blood sugar, right? Oh, your blood sugar is too high. We're going to give you a little more of this drug or that drug, or we're going to give you insulin. Well, guess what happens? Most of these drugs increase our insulin production or slightly increase our insulin sensitivity, but we still have high insulin. High insulin is the culprit in all this. It's a pro-growth hormone. It's a pro-fat storage hormone. So the more insulin we give people, guess what? The bigger they get. The more pro-growth signals that their cells have, the more cancer they get, the more narrowing of arteries they get, the more dysfunction of neurons they get. Here we have a reversible disease that we're treating with pharmaceuticals that aren't working. Alzheimer's disease. This is a big one, been in the news a lot lately. In 2000, we had 4 million cases. In 2021, we have 6.2 million, and it's projected by 2060, we'll have 13.8 million cases. This is a lifestyle-driven disease. There are no drugs that prevent or reverse Alzheimer's disease. And frankly, there are no drugs that slow or the progression of the disease. But many of you may have seen the big splash, new Alzheimer's drug. The trade name is Aduhelm. The generic name is aducanumab, developed by the company Biogen that helped develop the mRNA vaccine with Pfizer. This drug came out earlier this year, or late last year. $56,000 per person per year, but it's now discounted to $28,000. And there is little evidence that it works. This is a fascinating story because there's an advisory committee of neurologists and experts in brain health. And that advisory committee voted 10 to nothing, 10 to 0, one abstention, to not approve this drug, saying there's absolutely no evidence this drug has any effect on the outcome of Alzheimer's. Guess what? The FDA approved it anyway. Yeah. Big business. It's not for the people, by the people, for the people. It's by the corporations, for the corporations. Alzheimer's disease is lifestyle driven and it can't be drugged away. It has sometimes been called type 3 diabetes because of its strong associated with elevated blood sugar. 80% of people with Alzheimer's have insulin resistance or they have type 2 diabetes. And guess what? 90% of the population doesn't even know they're insulin resistant. So if you don't know something, then you can't do something about it. We have to be better as physicians at detecting and aggressively changing lifestyles to treat metabolic disease. Cancer. This is the world I live in. I'm the medical director at John Stoddard Cancer Center. In 2000, we had 1,200 cases diagnosed, 552,000 deaths. If you listen to, the American Cancer Society, we're winning this, quote, war on cancer. No, we're not. In 2020, we had 1.8 million cases of cancer and over 600,000 deaths. And only a third of people are actually cured of their cancer. The World Cancer Research Fund estimates that 60% of cancer is preventable, and it's driven largely by tobacco use and metabolic dysregulation, i.e., lifestyle. Wouldn't you rather try and prevent a cancer than be treated for a cancer? I would. So here's our comparison chart, modern agriculture versus modern medicine. They both have been co-opted by industry, right? We've had industrialization of both. There aren't little community docs anymore. They're all part of enormous healthcare systems. There aren't small companies producing our food. They're giant conglomerates. And this is getting worse. I was reading the other day, Cargill wants to buy a chicken processing company. And it's being looked at by the government, which I consider a joke. But what's going to happen then if Cargill has this giant chicken processing operation? They'll not only control the chickens, but they'll control all the inputs, right? All the feed, all the chemicals that go into making chickens. It's a scary thought. We have increasingly large chemical inputs to maintain yields, and we have increasingly large number of pharmaceuticals to maintain life. It's not going to work forever. It's a disaster waiting to happen. We've destroyed the soil microbiome. We're destroying our microbiome. And our microbiome is so important for immunologic health, neuro health, bowel health, and literally the health of every organ in our body. And then we have these environmental dead zones. Not only do we have dead zones like in the Gulf of Mexico, but deforestation continues unabated. And without trees, guess what? The planet heats up faster. We have more climate irregularities, more deaths. We have food dead zones, food apartheid. We have systemic discrimination that is not allowing people of color or poor socioeconomic background to gain and eat healthy food. Change agriculture, change health. You can't, quote, fix healthcare until you, quote, fix health. You can't, quote, fix health until you, quote, fix diet. And you can't fix the diet until you fix our agriculture system and our environment. I think this is probably self-evident to all of you. So what about organic agriculture? You guys are like my favorite people on the planet. That's all my wife and I buy. We go to farmers markets, we go to the Iowa Food Co-op, we know local farmers. And guess what? I don't have to take any pills. I feel like a 30-year-old. It's terrific. And you are part of the solution. More biodiversity, improving soil health through improving the microbiome and organic content. You're growing food that the human body craves. More real food. You're using fewer chemical inputs, leading to less human toxicity and less environmental toxicity, right? Less runoff, more organic material in the soil, more soil absorption of water. And guess what? What's the second biggest carbon sequestration model on Earth? The oceans are number one, soil is number two. We can sequester carbon. Food is medicine. So Mark Bittman, he's a journalist for the New York Times, has written several books. He defines food as a substance that provides nutrition and supports growth. He defines poison as a substance that promotes illness. Much of what is produced by industrial agriculture today is quite literally not food, but poison. We are slowly poisoning our bodies with our current food system. Fortunately, we have people like you who are trying to change that. Change the food system, we change human health. And it's not what's in the food, it's what's been done to the food that counts. Yeah, what's been done to the food that counts. So if you took broccoli and you ground it up and you separated all of its components, it no longer becomes a healthy food. The really fascinating thing and the arrogance of the human race is we know better than Mother Nature. That's silliness. Mother Nature's been around for eons. We've been around a small fraction of the history of the earth. Do you think that people lived and Mother Nature didn't provide, that we needed human inputs? Not true. We need to look to nature for the solution, not to the pharmaceutical industry, not to surgeries, Mother Nature. So one of the interesting things, and here I'm tying this to a whole nother scientific discipline, and that's really, human evolution. And the structure of our society, it's been shaped by this illusionary idea of rugged individualism, and nowhere is that more evident than the United States and survival of the fittest, right? You got to be ruthless to survive, because we think that's what Darwin said, but that is absolutely not what Darwin said. Darwin said the most sympathetic or compassionate of species will survive in the long term. Not the most ruthless, the most compassionate and cooperative. So we have to rethink how we treat one another and how we've siloed all these different entities, because what you do in agriculture directly influences what happens with my sphere of influence, and that's human health. Robert Sapolsky, he's a evolutionary neurobiologist out at Stanford. He writes, the long-term survival of a species, is predicated on nurturing, caring, and cooperation. Ruthlessness allows for short-term gains, i.e. profits, but not long-term survival. If you read Jared Diamond, some of his work, you'll understand this. Let's look at ancient civilizations. What happened to ancient civilization? And sure, this is a very complex study and a very complex issue, but one of the proposed causes for collapse is environmental degradation, deforestation, water pollution, soil degradation, and loss of biodiversity. These civilizations couldn't grow food anymore. And we can only go so long and grow enough food for the human population with chemical inputs and degradation of soil. Sooner or later, we're going to pay the price. We have to be more compassionate with one another, with every species on Earth, and with the Earth. We can no longer extract what we want from this Earth. We have to give back. Regenerative agriculture. So the last slide, I just want to thank all of you. Thank you for taking a risk to grow food in a compassionate, responsible, and sustainable way. And thank you to committing to a model to improve the food system, human health, and ultimately Earth health. I know this is a difficult battle. You are up against right government policies that are rigged against you. You're up against, all kinds of different things, corporate agriculture. It takes you to change the system. It takes us as consumers to buy your products. Sure, they might be $1 more, but do you know how much a bottle of pills cost down at Walgreens? You can pay now or you can pay later. And I encourage every one of the people I come across, pay now, support your local agriculture, support your organic farmers, because if you don't exist anymore. So huge thank you to all of you. That's all I have. I hope it's been somewhat enlightening. I hope I've not painted too grim a picture, because there is hope. There is always hope. And that hope starts with what you're doing. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you for all you do.
Yes. Wow. Amazing, Dr. Nish. I mean, I'm sure if everybody could, they would give you a big round of applause. This was by far just fascinating to hear. Quite a few things that literally gave me goosebumps when I heard them. There was a couple of comments, and Blair Frank said, gratefully hearing what I envision being shared widely and with grace and love. And I couldn't agree with that. Thank you for your way and your approach at sharing this. It was amazing. Angela said, are you as a healthcare professional in any way restricted in your practice by either the conventional medicine rules or what insurance will pay for to address these issues?
Yeah, so number one, I do not practice anymore. My energies are focused on education, appealing to a broad audience, and then I'm the medical director at Stoddard, so my energies are focused on how do we bring integrative principles into the cancer care model. I can answer that question somewhat. So number one, until payers recognize the value of prevention, it's not going to happen. And then we have, as societies, we have all these guidelines. So for example, in the cardiovascular society, you have a heart attack, here's the guidelines. You get a stent, and then you get 5 drugs. You get a statin, you get a blood thinner, you get an aspirin, you get something called a beta blocker, and you get something called an ACE inhibitor. And if you don't do those things, then you're not practicing state-of-the-art medicine. Now, let me just back up just a little bit, because there's this, doctors we're a bit like sheep, okay? Oh yeah, that's the guidelines, that's what we have to do. We really lose our inquisitiveness in medical school. And this was hammered home to me a number of years ago. I was at a college reunion, and I sat next to one of my classmates, and he was a professor of embryology out at Stanford. I said, oh, do you teach in the medical? Yep, I do. I hate the medical students. I hate teaching them because there's no curiosity. It's just, give me the information, I'm going to jam it in my brain, and I'm going to move on. So we lose our curiosity. So you think about these guidelines, and okay, these are supposed to be done by experts. And you have to also remember our medical literature is replete with conflicts of interest, okay? Not the most of which is 70% of all the studies are funded by industry, and that's an enormous problem. But we don't think. So let's just give a case example. Everybody knows what statins are, right? Cholesterol causes heart attacks. Nonsense, complete silliness. It's not true. So what do? We're recommended to give anybody with a risk. We calculate these risk scores. And if you have a risk score between 10 and 20% of having a heart attack in the next 10 years, you're automatically going to be given a statin. Well, there's an interesting number that most people don't know about, most physicians aren't trained about, and that's called the number needed to treat. And what the number needed to treat is, how many people do I have to give a statin to prevent one heart attack? And you might think, well, modern medicine, great pharmaceuticals, I might have to give it to one person or 5 people to prevent one heart attack. You know what that number is? 220. I have to give statins to 220 people to prevent one heart attack. So the number needed to treat is 1 in 217. So if I give 217 people a statin, if you look at the absolute risk reduction of having a heart attack, it's 0.46%. That's insane to me. Now, let's look at another study. There's a very famous study out of France. It's called the PREDIMED study. And what they did is they looked at people with an atherosclerotic risk score between 10 and 20%, and they gave them 3 different diets. They gave them the standard low-fat mantra that the American Heart Association has preached for years. They gave them a Mediterranean diet with supplemental nuts, and they gave them a Mediterranean diet with olive oil. Guess what happened? The low-fat diet didn't work. Those people still had heart attacks at the same rate as everybody else. But if you looked at the Mediterranean diet with nuts, their risk reduction was 1.7%, 3 times the risk reduction if you took a statin. If you looked at the people who were supplemented with olive oil, their risk reduction was even higher. It was 2.1%, 5 times better than if I had given them a statin. And there's no side effects to the Mediterranean diet. And that's the other thing. So there's not only a number needed to treat, but there's also a number needed to harm. So if you give someone a statin, what's the number needed to harm? Well, if I give someone a statin, the number of people I have to give a statin to commit harm, meaning let's just use diabetes because statins are associated with increased risk of diabetes, it's about 1 in 100. It makes no sense. These diseases are lifestyle driven, and these diseases can be prevented. And we can even, Dean Ornish has been very famously written for years about reversing coronary artery disease, blood vessel disease of the heart through diet. And his is an ultra low fat, plant-based diet, through diet, stress reduction, meditation, exercise. So it's not just about diet. And I don't want people to think, oh, if I change my diet, but I'm stressed, I can't sleep, I never exercise, and I have poor social relationships, that you're going to get better. We're in a holistic model. So diet and eating real food is part of it. Sleeping well is another part. Movement is another part. Social relationships is another part. Stress management is another part. So we have to look at the whole. But yeah, that's the silliness of our current system.
Yeah. Incredible. So there's a couple of people here asking about food. So when you used to practice, did you prescribe healthy food to your patients?
The answer is yes. So I was an interventional radiologist, which is kind of minimally invasive surgery. But I would see probably 80% of all the people I saw were overweight, metabolically dysregulated, or had end-stage something. End-stage kidney disease, end-stage liver disease, cancer, end-stage vascular disease. I mean, I'm on the spectrum of life. Yes, I developed a sheet and I handed it to everybody. It's like 5 pages. Here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to do. Number one, the lowest hanging fruit, get rid of sugary beverages. If you can get somebody to just get rid of that 1 soda a day, you can dramatically improve their metabolic profile. So we always started with beverages. What do you drink? Case example, I put a stent in a guy's leg. He couldn't walk. He was getting crampy pain. It's called claudication. Put a stent in his leg, goes away, doesn't follow up. A year later, he comes back. And this is a pseudonym. I will call him Joe. I said, Joe, how are you doing? Oh, I'm okay, doc, but I'm having pain in my leg again. And I looked at him and I'm like, boy, he doesn't look the same. I said, Joe, how much weight have you gained in the last year? 100 pounds, 1 year. I looked at him. I said, where do you work? I work at the Pepsi factory. How many Pepsis do you drink a day? 13 20-ounce Pepsis. Over 3,000 calories of sugar every day. So that is just typifies our system. And so yes, we try and educate people. And I, took as much time as I could. And in our modern system, it doesn't always work very well. But you know what? I always stress the importance of, you have to be really simplistic with most people, because if you start nuancing things, well, you got to eat organic, can't go there yet. If I can just get you to get rid of sugary beverages and processed foods, I make it really simple. If you can get rid of sugary beverages, processed foods, so those are foods that actually have a nutrition label, those are processed, and you can not go to the fast food stores, you're 80% of the way there. Because if you're not eating those things, then you almost by default have to be eating things that are good for you.
Yeah, little steps in the right direction is better than no steps at all.
My mantra is small steps done consistently over time leads to habits. So if it's too overwhelming for people, it's like cleaning your house. Oh my God, I can't clean this house. No, you take it a room at a time. So we take it a step at a time. Beverages first, always beverages first, one step at a time. If you can do that consistently for 3 months, then I'll move on to the next thing. What's next? And I don't tell people what to do. I let them come up with their own solutions, called motivational interviewing. If someone can come up with the idea and you can support the idea, they're much more likely to adopt that than you telling them. So me telling someone, you need to quit smoking, it's bad for you, that's ridiculous. Everybody knows smoking's bad for you. And that's the real problem, the messaging. The messaging has never been that the processed food industry is bad for you, has it? Oh no, it's good, it's convenient, it's good. It's got all these vitamins and minerals, which are practically worthless because we don't even know if they're absorbed. So it's about messaging, and the solution to this comes in multiple layers. It comes at the individual level, and no way am I saying that this is personal responsibility, because it isn't. We've adopted a food system that's addictive, and it's changing our hormones and chemicals to make us eat these things. So it's not shaming. It's not you eat too much, you don't exercise enough. That is out, that is gone. It's a hormone problem. Number two, we have got to teach people to support local growers. Go to the farmers markets, skip Hy-Vee, go to the farmers markets. Number three, we're going to have big changes in governmental policy to back all this up. Think about tobacco. It took literally decades for the government to finally take some action on removing tobacco front and center. And so what do you see when you go into the grocery store? You see walls of soda pop, you see walls of Lucky Charms, you see walls of Doritos, whatever it might be. And until we can move away from that, and we can get governmental policies that make sense for health, it's going to be difficult to change. And I think, we're still a ways away from that. But when you start seeing the class action lawsuits, that's when things change, exactly like tobacco. When money starts flowing out of their pockets because of holding them responsible for the crap they're feeding us, that's when you'll see change. And I think that it's still a number of years away.
Yeah, indeed. All righty. We'll do this. We'll do this one more question here, and then we'll wrap things up. So Roxanne said, thank you, Dr. Nish. I have been tracking functional medicine for several years now. Dr. Terry Walls has noted food as medicine for some time. Still, I have not seen a functional medicine department. What can we do about this? Functional medicine totally supports good foods.
Yeah, so I want to make a clarification between functional medicine and integrative medicine, because they're kind of two separate training pathways, but they have very much things in common. So Andrew Weil started the Integrative Medicine Fellowship at the University of Arizona in the late 90s. Integrative medicine really looks at the holistic perspective of care, as does functional medicine, using, food, sleep, and all of these things that we do as a human species. Functional medicine tends to break things down into small biochemical reactions and tries to replace or replete or change those reactions using supplements and things like that. So you're going to get a little different flavor. If you go to a functional medicine doc, they're probably going to do a whole lot of blood tests. They're going to tell you here, your chromium's a little low or your selenium's a little low. And maybe it is, whereas if you went to the integrative medicine doc, we would probably not do all those tests. We would just say, okay, let's eat a more diversified whole foods diet. And nature usually sorts itself out. So there's a bit of a difference, but we're still on the same mission. And that is, how do we use food, stress reduction techniques, sleep, et cetera, to improve human health? And why don't we have more of those people? Well, interesting question. I teach over at Des Moines Medical School, Des Moines University, and the medical students. And a lot of them are really interested in this. Say, great, you can go to a fellowship, you can go to a practice. Well, I'm too in debt. I've just got to go get a job. And that's a real problem. I call it, we're enslaving medical students into the system, because they come out of medical school and it's not unusual to have $300,000 to $400,000 in debt, and they need to go get a job that pays them money. Well, if you develop an integrative medicine practice, that's going to take years to develop and actually begin to turn a profit. They can't afford to. So we're enslaving medical students into our current system. It takes old guys like me who have had a great career, made a little bit of money, and now I can do whatever I want. We are seeing more people. I think this year in Des Moines, there's 2 or 3 docs in the Integrative Medicine Fellowship at Arizona right now. So we're seeing a few more of these people, but it's going to take time, and it's going to take third-party payers to pay for this. And that's one of the things, if you go to see an integrative or functional medicine doc, insurance typically won't pay for those things, which is completely backwards.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It's fascinating how the insurance companies do not help with, what really is important. Alrighty, well, Dr. Nish, thank you so much for your amazing, incredible presentation today. I know I personally learned a lot, and I look forward to tuning into our YouTube channel to review everything once more. But for everyone that attended today, I will be sending everyone an email with the link to the recording that will be posted on our YouTube channel, as well as a quick survey to get your thoughts and opinions. These survey responses are very valuable to us, as we do use them for grant reporting purposes. So if you could please take 5 minutes of your time to do the survey, that would be really wonderful. Dr. Nish, again, thank you from the bottom of our hearts for being here today and for sharing this very important message and spreading this truth to everyone. This was amazing.
Well, and thank you to all of you, because you don't realize how impactful you're going to be, not only on the environment, but on human health. And so keep it up, hold your heads high. You're doing the right thing. It may seem at times like you're beating your head against a wall, but I really, truly believe we're going to start seeing a shift towards this type of, as we recognize the detriments of where we're going. So keep up the great work and eat more spinach.
Yes, wonderful. Well, thank you so much again.
Okay.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good day.